Hi everyone. If you are on this video, then you have gotten to the end of orientation. Congratulations. Again, we had to kind of adjust what we normally do, and normally we all come together at the church building and we go through different training videos. When we get to the end, I always try to give some sort of challenge or exhortation, I guess, to the families. But this year, it's necessitated that we have needed to record this. So hopefully you will take the time to listen through this and maybe get a little bit of my heart, the board's heart, as we embarked on the summer journey of preparing for a pandemic school year. So as we start this final segment, there'll be a few questions at the end just to make sure that you've reviewed and kind of have thought through some things. But mostly I just want you to listen and be encouraged. One of the things that I always talk about is I always catch everybody up on our history at FEC. And so the very first year when we came into the new building and the new school year, it was really survival mode. We often said that it was like herding cats to try to do this big new adventure. And it was like herding cats, because many students had not been in classroom experiences. They had not had teachers. They didn't know how to put their names on papers. And so it was a challenging year, but a fruitful one. We felt like that all of us grew from that experience. The second year, we really wanted to build community, and we wanted the students to learn how to be a community as well. We did the fruit of the Spirit as devotions for the students. And then with the adults, we prayed for community. But what we didn't realize is that community often comes through suffering. And that year, we had several dads that lost their jobs. We had a dad that fell off a ladder and broke his pelvis. We had a dad that severely broke his leg. We had a student that severely broke his arm. And I could go on about the different scenarios that were popping up almost weekly. And our community did learn how to love and care for one another through providing meals, providing babysitting, rides for school, substituting for teachers that had to be out for an extended period. So we began that journey of learning to build community. But our second year, I would say, was probably rougher than our first year in a lot of respects. In the middle of the year, the church decided to do construction on 4 of its classrooms and displaced us to hallways and other smaller classrooms. And while God provided and gave us the space that we needed, it was a taxing journey, to say the least, with construction guys and painters coming through and really disrupting a lot of what we were doing. But again, He was faithful. We had a roof over our heads, and we made it through that year. But at the end of the year, we moved, and the church had decided that they weren't going to house groups in the facility at that time. So we had the daunting task of looking for new property, and we began that probably in March. And unbeknownst to us, there was a church in Walkersville that had just recently come through a really long renovation project, and a clean up and a clean out, because they had a property that was being very underutilized. We came along at the right time, and they were really interested in doing a partnership with us, and that was St. Paul's. They have 2 buildings, and they had built this, what they call education wing. We call it the elementary wing. And that gave 8 classrooms that were perfect for us. And so last year then, our big focus was just moving in. And you know what it's like when you move to a new facility, to a new home, to a new church. It's full of boxes. It's full of unpacking, putting things together. So the theme of my summer last year was really just putting things together and getting things put where they needed to be. So then we we embarked on that new year in our home that we anticipate would be a home for a while. They really want to recoup a lot of the money they had spent on renovations. They liked having children and adults around using the building and felt like it was a very fruitful partnership. However, as all of us know, in the middle of March, our world shut down and we came home and we went online, which is not our comfort zone at FEC. We're a classical homeschool group, and we really move away from online and from videos and a lot of documentaries and all of that. We want to be in the primary sources. We want to be looking at real books, talking to one another, discussing things. And so coming home and having to go all virtual was challenging for everybody. But when it is not at all your business model, then it's super challenging. But we all worked through that. And then in June decided that at that time, based on the metrics that we had, the information that we had, and also what the schools were hoping to do in the fall, which was a hybrid kind of model, we set out our plan. We felt like we needed a couple of months to put it in motion. And so we decided in June that we would bring our K to 5th graders in on Mondays and our 6th to 12th graders in on Wednesdays. Appropriately distance, use masks, use hand sanitizer, have a strong regimen of cleaning throughout the building, and hopefully being able to get through this period unscathed. But we're not sure. So as we enter our 4th year and our 3rd birthday party will not necessarily be cake this year, probably individually packed cupcakes, and we'll do that sometime in the fall. But as we enter our 4th year, there is much uncertainty and much fear, even up to this point. I would like to say that people have made their decisions and have settled into what the school year will look like. But each and every day, I get phone calls and emails about, well, what about this? Could I do this? I get lots of phone calls from public school or private school in other counties that maybe aren't going back. And parents want to know the different options. It's become very exhausting. And at some point, I'm hoping that we shift gears and that we just start the move forward. There are many, many options out there for parents this year, more than we normally offer. We've offered the online only option, an online follow along option, and so our teachers, I just want to say here, our teachers will be doing the very best that they can to accommodate your needs and your desires. But we can't have 100 and however many different plans for all of the different children that we have. So I had shared that the board labored, prayed, researched much this summer, asking the question, would we meet? How often? Could we possibly have 2 locations? Could we do distancing? Could we purchase more equipment? And what challenges would that provide? Fortunately, by the beginning of July, our board was really moving forward in things like developing health protocols. And we were beginning to envision what the school year would look like. As we sent out those emails, we had lots of different responses, as you can imagine. Of course, we had people that thought the masks were dumb, and we had people that didn't feel like the masks would be enough. We had people that felt like we were over the top in our expectations and our desires for how we would facilitate the fall, and we had those who said we weren't doing enough. And it is very hard to balance that, and I want you to know that we very seriously are looking at the conditions for the fall, taking it seriously, and want to do the very best that we can to protect you and your children. So with that, I say this is going to be a very bumpy year. I would like to say that in our 4th year of existence that we would kind of be smooth sailing at this point, but I cannot say that as much as I desire. Many of you who know me know that when I am confused, sad, frustrated, I gravitate to the Old Testament. I call them my Old Testament guys, that I tend to just spend a lot of time, research, think through what they were experiencing and doing, and I find comfort in that. Not necessarily God gives me the answers, but that's where I go. The very first year I pondered Joseph as he went to a new place. The second year we talked about Moses and Aaron, and how Moses had people on either side of him bolstering up his arms as the Israelites fought with the Amalekites. And that was the support. We needed the support of one another. But this summer I have been sitting in camp with the Israelites as they camped by the Red Sea and waited for what God would be doing in their midst. As you know, when they left Egypt, they left after God had prepared and gave to the Egyptians many plagues, 10 of them. And finally, at the loss of human life, Pharaoh decided to let the Israelites go, to allow them to leave Egypt. But we see God's hand in all of that, and even as Pharaoh is allowing the Israelites to leave, God is once again going to harden Pharaoh's heart. I don't understand all of that, of God's manipulating people's hearts, but he does harden Pharaoh's heart, and then Pharaoh decides that he's going to change his mind. He gathers his army, and he goes after them. Now they're camped at the Red Sea. Think about your trip to the ocean this summer and get that in your mind. As they're camping there, the Israelites become very afraid as they realize the army is coming after them. So I want to read the story, and then I want to talk a little bit about it. And so I have it open here, and we are going to begin reading at chapter 14 of Exodus. They're not out yet, or not completely out of the woods yet. And there is a little bit of interaction here with the Lord and with Moses, and they go back and forth, and I want to pick it up in, let me see which verse I wanted to pick it up. So I'll pick up in verse 9, because this is where Pharaoh's heart has once again been hardened. And it says, the Egyptians then chased after them with all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army. They overtook them camping by the sea. And so, they didn't build houses there. They were camping. I don't even know if they had any sort of tents, but they were camping there. And as Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. Thankfully, they are still of the mentality and of the heart to know that they need to cry to the Lord. But then they look at Moses, and they say to him, is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. But Moses said to the people, do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. And as for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the sons of Israel shall go through the midst of the sea on the dry land. And as for me, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them, and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army. through his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I am honored through Pharaoh, through his chariots and his horsemen." And the angel of God, who had been going before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. So God already is providing protection there. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were divided. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on the dry land, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right and on their left. Then the Egyptians took up the pursuit, and all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen went in after them. They thought they were going to get them into the midst of the sea. And it came about at the morning watch that the Lord looked down on the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of the fire and cloud, and brought the army of the Egyptians into confusion. And he caused their chariot wheels to swerve, and he made them drive with difficulty. And they said, "Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord is fighting for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians and over their chariots." And so Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal state at daybreak, while the Egyptians were fleeing right into it. Then the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea, and the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even Pharaoh's entire army that had gone into the sea, and not even one of them remained. And then there's a little bit more there where they're reminded of trusting in the Lord. And we see again, even in verse 29, they had walked through and they saw the wall of water on either side of them. So I want to talk about that just briefly. And one of the things that we keep saying is we want to go back to normal. We want the past, and the Israelites wanted that as well. And they even told Moses that better for us, if we had stayed in Egypt, we could keep working for them, but better that we had stayed there. And instead, now we're going to die in the ocean. And we say that as well. It's better if we have what we had last year, but we don't. And we have to keep moving forward. And if that's part-time digital, full-time 2 days a week, whatever it is, we have to keep moving forward. In verse 14, I found it very interesting that Moses tells them that the Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. And as we come to this period where we're getting ready to end the school year, I'm not telling you not to talk, or to stay silent, but at some point we make the decision and we move forward, and we stop trying to figure out all the different options. And so I found that very interesting, for them to keep silent, to listen to the Lord, and to really pray. And finally, we have to get moving. So we see then that Moses lifts his staff, and that God parts the water with the strong east winds. Now, I did a lot of research on this, and of course scientists believe that it was a weather phenomenon, and that could certainly be the case, but I live believing this is my Father's world, and he could use whatever. He could use his actual hands. Of course, he's spirit, so we don't know how that would work. Or he could use a weather phenomenon. I can't say that word. But either way, something happened to those waters that parted them. So we can argue the science on that all we want. But it is his earth, and we do know that something happened there. There have been various claims that there are chariot wheels and bones at the bottom of the sea, and I've not spent a whole lot of time on that, but I believe that something happened there. Moses lifts his staff and the waters are parted. Moses lifts his staff again and they are put back. So I want you to imagine with me for a minute that you are standing on the edge of that of the Red Sea. Dale, if any of you, it's a very narrow body of water. I would encourage you to look it up online to see the map. It is believed that they crossed at the northern kind of a channel, and so it wouldn't have been nearly as wide. That's where God had led them to. However, I did look into the depths of the Red Sea, and it could go pretty deep. At the area where they were, it was likely about 1,600 feet deep. And so it would have been like walking into the Grand Canyon, going down, 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 and then across and back up. But I've often wondered what it looked like on either side of them. There were these walls of water. And one thing I discovered as I was researching a little bit more today, this was at night for them, which to me would have been even more terrifying. But there is some sort of light that's guiding them. But I wondered, could they see the fish? They probably smelled the fishy smells. While the land was dry, was it completely dry, or was it a little bit swampy? Some folks think that they crossed like in a marshy area, but it does say dry land. So there's lots of speculation on what would have gone on, but there was a reason they stopped at the ocean. Where the ocean met the land, and that's where they were camping. So it wouldn't have been an easy cross for them, or they would have probably already crossed. So I imagine these people with kids and their stuff, and older people, maybe parents that are with them, and families, and they're standing there on the edge of the ocean, and God miraculously separates the waters, and there's two walls around them. And there may have been discussion. Is this safe? Should we cross? What's going to happen to us? And yet at some point, and perhaps it was Moses, perhaps it was some of his other leader types, that eventually grabbed the people by the hands and said, come on, let's go. And I have told many of you that story this summer, that at some point, and probably right about now, is when we say, come on, let's go. We're going to do this thing. We don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to trust in the Lord to make the decisions that are best. And if we feel like we need to do something else, we'll stay at home for a period. But we all have to kind of have that mentality of just moving forward. They were nervous and they were frightened. They were uncertain. They probably didn't know how long it would be, but it was about 2.5 miles in that little northern neck of the ocean. Even that, I can walk 2.5 miles, but let's add in night and let's add in the thundering waters beside. And that's what they began to cross. And they went into the unknown. Now, this story is one that has a lot more detail than some of the other stories that we see. With Joseph, we don't know anything about his life as he grows up in Egypt. We know that he's kidnapped, and we know that he got there into Egypt. But this is the point where they come out now from Joseph being in Egypt and his family, the Israelites, eventually going there. So we have fears and doubts, but we can be encouraged by what the Israelites went through. We too have chosen to take a path, and we're at this point in the summer where it's time to say to one another, come on, let's go. Let's do the best we can. You will step down into what is unknown in many respects, but there have been careful preparations, and so we encourage you to trust in that and to communicate with us if you feel like there could be better preparations or there could be other things that we do. But this is the great unknown, and we are responding in faith. At the same time, I feel like our world has been thrown into great confusion. And we see that God does put the army into a great confusion. And we saw that in verses 24 and 25. It says, the Lord looked down on the army of Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud and brought great confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve, and he made them drive with difficulty, and they realized it. We live in a world of great confusion. And we see it politically, We see it with COVID. We see it racially. And it is distressing for us to see all of that confusion around us. What we have tried to do at FEC is to take our little corner of the world and clear up the confusion as much as possible. We want to provide plans for you that show thoughtfulness went into it. And just like God was very clear with the Israelites and what they were supposed to do, and he gave them a plan, we feel like prayerfully that we have set up this plan. Now I want to clear up a few things here and clarify. I'm not saying that no one will get sick. We should expect a rocky health year. The officials have already said that. Last year was a rocky flu season, and they're expecting a rocky flu season again this year. Last year we had a lot of strep and the stomach bug. You just have that in communities of children. We should expect that perhaps someone in our midst will get COVID. That expectation being out there and in front of us, and realizing that it is a disease that spreads quickly as folks come back from vacations, as folks are with family. We could have someone come into our midst, even with all of the mitigation that we're doing. Somebody could come in and expose other people. And for that, we have plans as well. If we need to shut down for a period, we will shut down for a period. We will continue to communicate with you, and we will bring us back just as soon as we feel like it's safe. But we should, with things reopening, people seem surprised that COVID is spreading. People seem surprised that in vacation towns and resorts that COVID is on the rise. Well, none of us should be surprised at that. And just because they say that there's thousands and thousands of people that have it, that doesn't mean that all of those people have it right now. That means that's how many tests have accumulated to this point. As of today, when I checked Frederick's statistics, there had been no new deaths in several days, and the positivity rate was down under 1%, I believe. And the number of cases had really slowed down. It's like, 2 or 3. And I didn't check Maryland, but we will keep those statistics in front of you. And if we see great and dramatic climbs, then we would certainly think through whether we need to be meeting. We should also expect to give grace and mercy to each other, but especially to our teachers. I've had various requests on when teachers should teach their a certain child's class, or what the teacher should do in that class. Please know that your teachers, a lot of them are teaching multiple classes, and they will be trying to pre-record some things. They will be running some things live, and they will be probably working harder with this one day in, one day digital than they would be working under normal circumstances. Most people have their own children, and so consider that, and do your very best. We know that you have paid money. We thank you for coming on the journey with us, but please realize that much grace will be given. There might be times when the internet is out and a teacher can't teach. There might be times when your internet is out and you can't follow along. So we ask that you anticipate to say, hey, I know these things are going to happen. I'm sure as the Israelites crossed the ocean floor, there were older people who maybe tripped and fell down. Kids who had to be hoisted onto their dad's back because they couldn't keep up. I'm sure they weren't moseying across the ocean floor. I'm sure they were booking it across the ocean floor. They were determined and they had purpose. And we're going to be booking it across the ocean floor. But there will be times when we stumble. I will stumble. April will stumble. The rest of the board will stumble. You will stumble. And that's where we just have to grab each other by the elbow and say, come on, let's go. We can do this. So there are 3 things that I want to encourage you. We don't understand God's hand in all of this. He does go before us. If I had any wonderful solutions or insight into why this is happening in our world, I would certainly share them, but I don't. But I do want to encourage you in 3 ways. First, be prayerful. I would ask that you pray for FEC and the families every single day. I will be on Mondays. I teach very little, so I will probably be in the sanctuary praying for that first half hour in the morning. And if you want to join me, I would love to have you join me for that. If I'm not there, then jump in and just start praying. Kneel at the altar if you choose. Make a circle, but we need to cover FEC and our families in prayer. The second thing I want to ask you to do is to be faithful to do your part. Be faithful to do your health checks at home, and more information will follow on that. Be faithful to stay home. If your child is exhibiting the symptoms or fever, stay home and rest, and know that you will get something online or something from the teachers to help you keep moving forward. Also, be willing to adjust to the various models of learning. We could be online for 2 weeks. We could be online for longer. We could be back in school 2 days a week by the spring. I don't know. And everyone asks me, like, how will we determine? And our world leaders don't even know what to tell you as far as what do you look for to open back up. And then the last thing, I want to ask you to be courageous. And in verse 13, that's what Moses asked them to do. But Moses said to the people, "Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever." And in verse 28, it says, "Not even one of them remained," speaking of the army. And I want to ask you to be courageous as you buckle down for a difficult school year. Everybody, your public school friends, your private school friends, your friends at FEC are all facing this. Learn to find buddies that you can weekly evaluate, weekly talk to, maybe even move into little pods for that other day of education and help each other out. But be courageous. My theme verse this year is going to be, "Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today." As we prepare to embark on this journey, imagine stepping onto that ocean floor. Perhaps Moses was leading them and took the first steps. There are uncertainties and fears, and they flood into us. And no pun intended there, but they do flood into us. And that's where then I ask you to go back and be prayerful, faithful, and courageous. Many of you who know me may or may not know that I was a Star Trek junkie when I was younger, and my sisters used to make fun of me for that. And even into our older years, now I have some Star Trek junkie kids. But on the more recent movies that have come out, there's a reference. Jim Kirk is always the one that's just ready to forge ahead with the latest, greatest adventure. And often Dr. McCoy, who is the ship's doctor, is usually cautioning him, let's hang back. But they are getting ready to go into a shuttle that's going to take them to the Enterprise or take them maybe to Starfleet Academy. I'm not even sure. But there is an indication that this is going to be an adventure. And Jim Kirk looks at Dr. McCoy and he says, "Buckle up." And that's all I've got to say to you is buckle up, because it is going to be quite the journey this year. I am excited to start the journey and to be able to cross this ocean floor of COVID that will possibly get us to the other side, hopefully sooner than later. But we've got to cross it, and I will cross it and will be the first one to take those steps. And if you don't know, I am a high risk. I have type 1 diabetes and high blood pressure. And I will be taking every precaution when I'm in your midst. So please don't be offended if I step back from you or if I have my mask on. But I will be taking those precautions, and I expect that you guys will as well. So as we get ready to begin our 2020-2021 adventure, buckle up. Thank you.